In 1972, a quiet dairy farmer named Amos Stoltzfus, just outside Lancaster, Pennsylvania, did something his English neighbors thought was foolish. He refused to open a single retirement account. He never bought a stock. He never spoke to a financial advisor. When he died at the age of 89, his family inherited a working farm, 3 houses, a cabinetry shop, and just over $1.4 million in physical assets and cash reserves, no 401k, no IRA, no pension. Nobody outside his community knew. That is not a fluke. That is the system. The Amish have never had a retirement account in the modern sense, and yet they almost never run out of money in old age. They do not depend on Wall Street. They do not depend on Social Security checks to survive, and they do not panic when the market drops 30% in a single quarter. They have been doing this since long before the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. What they preserved is the exact money system the rest of us were quietly trained to forget. The first time I sat at a kitchen table near Millersburg, Ohio, and watched an old Amish man settle a $4,000 debt with his neighbor using nothing, a handwritten ledger and a stack of cash from a coffee tin, I did not understand what I was looking at. I had spent 30 years of my own life paying interest. I did not need to pay carrying a mortgage. I was told was normal, and trusting institutions that took a small piece of every dollar I earned. That afternoon, watching that ledger close with a pencil mark and a handshake, I realized I had been playing a different game my whole life. A game where I was never meant to win. What I am about to share with you was not invented by some financial guru. It was preserved by plain families who simply never stopped doing what every American household did before 1913. And by the end of this, I am going to show you one specific practice drawn from a community mutual aid record kept in Holmes County since 1891 that an ordinary person with a checking account and a normal paycheck can begin this weekend. It does not require capital. It does not require an advisor. It works whether you are 45 or 75. Stay with me, because this is the part the financial industry spent 80 years convincing you no longer applies. Here's the first thing that confused me when I started spending time with Amish families. They do not separate their money into categories the way we do. There is no retirement bucket, no emergency fund app, no brokerage account, no Roth, no traditional, no rollover. There is just the household. And the household is treated as a living thing that must feed itself, repair itself, and pass itself on. When an Amish man in his 30s earns money from carpentry or farming, that money does not flow into 7 different accounts managed by 7 different institutions, each one taking a fee. It flows into the household. Some of it pays the immediate bills. Some of it is converted into tools, livestock, lumber, or land. Some of it sits in physical cash inside the home. And a portion of it, usually between 5% and 10%, goes into what they call the church fund, or in some communities, the aid fund, which functions as a kind of collective insurance and retirement reservoir shared across the entire community. That fund is the quiet engine. It is why an Amish widow in her 70s does not need a 401k. When her husband dies, the community does not send condolences in a casserole. They send carpenters to repair her roof, neighbors to harvest her fields, and money from the aid fund to cover any expense the family cannot meet. The aid fund has been operating in some Pennsylvania districts continuously since the mid-1800s. It has never collapsed. It has never been frozen by a bank. It has never lost half its value in a stock market crash. Now compare that to what happened in 2008. Millions of Americans who had done exactly what they were told contributed to their 401k for 30 years. Watch between 30% and 50% of their retirement evaporate in 18 months. Many of them, especially those in their late 50s and early 60s, never recovered. The Amish lost nothing that year, not because they were lucky, because they were never inside the system that lost. But here is what surprised me even more. The Amish are not anti-money. They are not poor by choice. They are not living some monastic vow of simplicity. Many Amish families in Lancaster County and Holmes County are quietly worth more than their English neighbors with 6-figure salaries. They simply built wealth using a method that was standard in this country until a specific set of laws, a specific advertising campaign convinced everyone else to abandon it. That method has 4 pillars, and I want you to understand each one, because once you see them, you cannot unsee them. The first pillar is debt avoidance as a moral principle, not a financial strategy. An Amish family treats debt the way most Americans treat a house fire. It is an emergency to be extinguished immediately. When a young Amish couple needs a house, they do not get a 30-year mortgage. The community builds the house. The couple repays the community over time, interest-free, on terms that flex with the harvest. The average Amish home is built for somewhere between 40% and 60% of what an equivalent English home costs, because there is no contractor margin, no bank interest, and no insurance overhead built into the price. A family that would have paid $400,000 over 30 years for a $200,000 house in the conventional system pays roughly $100,000 over 8 to 12 years in the Amish system. The difference, $300,000, stays in the household. That is one house. Multiply it by a lifetime. The second pillar is the conversion of income into physical, productive assets rather than paper assets. When an Amish farmer has a strong year, he does not buy index funds. He buys another milking cow, another acre, another set of tools, another building. Each of those assets produces income or reduces future expense. A cow produces milk for 10 to 12 years, a well-maintained barn lasts a century, a piece of farmland appreciates and feeds the family simultaneously. Paper assets can go to zero overnight. A cow cannot go to zero. A field cannot disappear in a market correction. The third pillar is the cash reserve held inside the home. Most Amish households keep somewhere between 3 and 12 months of expenses in physical cash, in a safe, in a drawer, in a coffee tin, in a hidden box behind a beam. This is not paranoia. This is the same practice every American grandmother followed before 1933. When the banks closed during the Great Depression, the families with cash at home ate. The families with everything in the bank waited in line for months to recover pennies on the dollar. The Amish remember that lesson. The English forgot it within a single generation. Now, if you are already in debt, or already retired on Social Security and a small pension, and you are thinking this only applies to people who started young, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. The fourth pillar, the one that costs absolutely nothing to begin, the one I want you to actually use, is what the Amish call the household ledger. Not a budgeting app, not a spreadsheet, a simple paper notebook kept on the kitchen table where every single dollar that enters leaves the household is written down by hand in pencil at the end of each day. I know what you are thinking. You have heard of budgeting. You have tried it. You quit after a week. This is not that. The Amish ledger is not a budget. It is a witness. It does not tell you what to spend. It shows you with brutal honesty where your money actually went. And it does something a phone app cannot do. It forces you to physically touch every transaction in your own handwriting while sitting still at the end of the day. That physical act, repeated nightly, rewires the relationship between a person and their money within about 6 weeks. I have watched Amish grandmothers in their 70s pull out ledgers that go back 40 years. Every cow sold, every barrel of feed bought, every dollar given to the aid fund, every dollar received from a grown child. 40 years of money history, in pencil, in a notebook that cost $2. They can tell you to the dollar what the family spent on shoes in 1986. Try doing that with your banking app. If you are living paycheck to paycheck right now, this is where you start. Not with investing, not with a side hustle, not with cryptocurrency, with a $2 notebook and a pencil every evening before bed for 60 days. By the end of those 60 days, you will know exactly where between $400, $1,000, $200 per month of your income is going that you currently cannot account for. Every single household I have seen do this, honestly, has found money they did not know they were losing. Not theoretical money, real money. Already in their paycheck, already gone before they realized. Now here is the part that took me almost 2 years to learn. The Amish do not advertise it, and it is not written in any popular finance book. It comes from a record I was shown in a farmhouse near Berlin, Ohio, in a binder kept by a deacon whose family has maintained the community aid record since 1891. The Amish operate what is essentially a private household level pension. It works through a single specific mechanism that any family in America can replicate without a bank, without a brokerage, and without permission from anyone. They call it in the Pennsylvania Dutch dialect the Sondergeld, which translates roughly as separate money or set aside money. Here's how it actually functions. Every time a piece of physical productive value enters the household, whether it is a payment for cabinetry work, the sale of a calf, money from quilts sold at a roadside stand, or a side payment from a neighbor for repair work, a fixed portion, traditionally 10%, but in poorer households as low as 3%, is immediately physically separated from the rest of the money before it ever touches household spending. Not at the end of the month, not after bills. The moment it arrives, before anything else happens. That separated money is then converted, usually within 30 to 90 days, into one of three things: a physical asset that produces income or reduces future expense, a contribution to the community aid fund, which generates a lifetime claim on community support in old age, or stored physical cash held against the certainty of future need. It is never spent on consumption. It is never lent at interest. It is never invested in anything the household cannot see, touch, or visit. The result, compounded over a working life of 40 to 50 years, is that an Amish household in its 60s owns its home outright, owns its tools outright, owns its land outright, has a meaningful cash reserve in the house, has a documented claim on a community fund that has never failed in over a century of operation. That is the retirement account. It does not appear on any government form. It cannot be taxed in the conventional way. It cannot be frozen, seized in a market crash, or eroded by a brokerage fee. And it produces, in real terms, a standard of living in old age that most American retirees on a $600,000 401k cannot match. The surprising part, the part the deacon explained to me with a small smile, is that the Sondergeld practice was completely standard in rural American households of every denomination until the early 1950s, when a coordinated advertising push from the new mutual fund industry, the emerging consumer credit industry, convinced the average family that keeping money at home was foolish, that buying physical assets was old-fashioned, and that the modern way was to put everything into financial products managed by professionals for a small annual fee. That small annual fee, compounded over 40 years, is the difference between an Amish retirement and an English retirement. You can begin the Sondergeld this week. You do not need permission. You do not need an account. You need an envelope or a jar or a small lockbox. The next time money enters your household in any form, physically remove 10% of it before anything else happens. If 10% feels impossible, start with 3%. Start with 1%. The amount matters less than the act. The act of separating physically before the money enters the flow of spending is what rewires everything. Within 90 days, decide what that separated money becomes. Not a stock, not a fund, something physical. A tool you will use for 20 years. A repair to your home that eliminates a future expense. A stockpile of food that hedges against grocery inflation. Cash held against an emergency that would otherwise force you into a credit card. The principle is that the separated money must become something that either produces value or prevents loss, and it must remain inside your direct control. If you do this for 1 year, you will have between $1,000 and $4,000 of real, controllable, household-level wealth that did not exist before. And more importantly, you will have rebuilt the muscle that 2 generations of Americans were quietly trained to forget. The muscle of keeping your own money inside your own walls, under your own hand, answering to no one, that is the system. That is why the Amish, who have never had a retirement account, never run out of money. And that is what was taken from the rest of us, one advertisement at a time, starting in 1953. You did not lose this because you were careless. You lost it because an entire industry was built to make sure you never learned it existed, and now you have it back. If you are the kind of person who suspected deep down that the simplest money truths were quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do next. Pick one of these: the ledger, the cash reserve, the Sondergeld envelope, the household as a living thing, and try it this week. Just one? Then come back and tell me which one. Drop it in the comments below. I read them and I answer the ones that ask real questions. If you found something here that the financial industry never taught you, subscribe. Stand with the people who are quietly rebuilding the old system inside their own homes. In the next video, I am going to show you the specific Amish practice for handling a medical emergency without insurance. The one the deacon in Berlin told me has kept his community out of medical debt for over 100 years. You are not going to believe how simple it is. I will see you there.